Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be dealing with the part 4, that is pre-fertilization structure and events. In that we'll be studying pollination in detail. It is under the same chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants and unit reproduction. So let me recap what I have done in part 3. In part 3, we have completed the pre-fertilization structure and events, and in that we have studied about the gynoecium. In the gynoecium, we have studied the structure of the pistil, or the pistil is also called as gynoecium or carpel. Then what is megasporogenesis, then what is megaspore, then structure of the embryo sac. With continuation to that video, today I'll be dealing with the pollination. It also comes under the pre-fertilization structure and events. So what is pollination? So what and all we'll be studying. So the pollination, what is pollination, what are the kinds of the pollination or the types of pollination, and what are the agents of the pollination, what are the pollinating agents. So we'll be studying this much in today's video. So let me start. So what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a pistil. So here the anther pollen grains are being transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, the different flower, or the different flowers of the different plant. So you can see in the figure the pollen grains are being transferred by the honeybee, which is a pollinating agent, and it is transferring on the stigma of the another flower. This process is called as pollination. It is very, very important for fertilization to happen and for the completion of the reproduction. So there are some external agents which help the plants for the pollination. So pollination is done by some of the agents, external agents. So depending on the sources, depending on these external agents, the pollination is of 3 types. So what is that? So first is autogamy, then gytenogamy. These both comes under self-pollination, and then third type is the xenogamy, which is also called as cross-pollination. We'll see each one in detail now. So what is autogamy or self-pollination? It is the transfer of the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Within the same flower, the pollen grains of that flower are being transferred on the stigma of the same flower here. So this is called as self-pollination. In the flowers with exposed anthers and stigma, complete autogamy is rare. But this complete autogamy is a bit problem for the flowers where the anthers are exposed. Why? Because if the anthers are exposed, then there are chances of anthers are exposed and stigma is exposed, there are chances of pollination is happening by the different sources, different plants rather than the self plant. So thereby complete autogamy is rare in the flowers where the anthers and the stigma is exposed, because they are more prone to the pollination by other sources, so rather than its own flower. Then autogamy in such flowers requires synchrony in pollen release and stigma receptivity. In such flowers, what type of flowers? Where the anthers and the stigma is exposed. So in that flowers, for pollination to occur, there must be a synchrony between the pollen release and the stigma receptivity. What is this synchrony? Let me tell you in detail. This pollen release time as well as the receptivity of the stigma, both times should be at one time. Both should come in same time. Then only the pollination will occur. The pollens will release. As soon as the pollens are released, the stigma should be able to receive it, and then thereby it has to go to the ovary. It has to undergo a process of fertilization and pollination has to occur. So this is first point. Then other than the synchrony, what should be there in the flowers where the anthers and the stigma is exposed for a self-pollination to take place? Here the anthers and stigma should lie close to each other. So as they are exposed, if they are very close to each other, there are chances of easy transfer of the pollen grains to the stigma of that flower only. So rather than they are far away each other, then there is a problem of the pollen grains falling on the stigma of the same flower. So this is about the autogamy. Now we'll see the example of some of the plants and what are the flowers in that, and we'll see what is that. So plants like viola, it is commonly called as common pansy. then oxalis and commonlina, they produce two types of flowers here. It is seen in a autogamous flowers here. So what are these two types of flowers? Chasmogamous flower and cleistogamous flower. So you can see in the diagram, I have shown the chasmogamous flower of the oxalis plant here. So what are chasmogamous flower? These are the flower, they are very similar to the normal flower what we see. So they are exposed, they are with exposed anthers and the stigma. So they are normally open flower and you can see the anthers and the stigma. Example, how you can see hibiscus, almost all the general flowers what you can see. Then what are cleistogamous flowers here? So they do not open at all. You cannot see the opening bloom flowers of this. They are always in a bud condition. They are in a closed condition. The anthers and the stigma lie close to each other in this type of flowers. Why? Because they are open, they are not open, they are closed. Hence anthers and stigma will be close to each other as they are in a bud form. If it is open, then the anthers and the stigma will be exposed in a wind. Then they are autogamous. Cleistogamous flowers are autogamous. Why? As the anthers and the stigma are close to each other, 100% chances are there for the self-pollination. That is, anthers of that flower are falling on the stigma of the same flower. As it is not opening, there are no chances of the pollen grains going out and falling on some other flower there. Then, so when anthers dehisce in the flower buds, so now inside the flower bud, anthers dehisce. Then pollen grains come in contact with the stigma for the pollination. So how pollination will occur? The anther will dehisce and the pollens will fall on the stigma and thereby pollination will happen. Everything is happening within this bud only. So these flowers show pollination even in the absence of the pollinators. These cleistogamous flowers, no, they don't need a pollinating agent as they are closed. It is not open. Stigma and the anthers are there inside that only. So there is easy falling of the pollen grains on the stigma. So thereby no need for them for the carrying of the pollen grains. So in the absence of the pollinators also, they can show a very well defined pollination. So then here I have shown you the diagrams of Commelina plant and the Viola plant showing both the type of flowers, Chasmogamous flower and the Cleistogamous flower. You can see in the Chasmogamous flower, in the both this one, you can see the opened up flower with a very colorful attractive petals, blue colored one, and anthers and stigma are very much exposed here. And in Cleistogamous, you can see the buds. Usually it will be inside the soil, attached to the root. Here in figure 1.1 you can see the Chasmogamous and the Cleistogamous flowers of the Commelina. Cleistogamous flowers are usually present below the soil under the roots. Now second type of pollination called as geitinogamy. It is also a type of self-pollination. It is the transfer of the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. Here also the anthers are falling on the stigma but on the different flower of the same plant. Plant is not different, plant is same plant, but the two different flowers are showing the pollination here. You can see the diagram there, the same plant, the pollen grains of one flower are falling on the stigma of another flower. So such type of pollination is called as geitinogamy. It is functionally a cross pollination because it is involving two different flowers here. So pollinating agent is also involved here because the flowers may be far away from each other in a same plant. So that time they need a pollinating agent to transfer the pollen grain from one flower to the another flower. So thereby we can tell this as a cross pollination functionally. But genetically they are similar to autogamy. So why? Because since the pollen grains are from the same plant, they are not from a two different plant, so genetically they are similar. So I can tell functionally it is a cross pollination, but genetically it is a self pollination. Now coming to the third type of pollination, that is xenogamy. It is functionally, genetically, it is a cross pollination. So what is this? It is the transfer of the pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a different plant. Here two flowers are involved from a two different plants, then pollen grains from the flower of one plant will fall on the stigma of the flower of the other plant. You can see the diagram there. So how the two flowers are involved from the two different plants. So it brings genetically different pollen grains to the stigma. Here the pollen grain and stigma are genetically different from each other. So now here I have shown you a diagram where you can see all the three types of the pollination in a single page here. So there are two plants, plant A and plant B, and you can see autogamy. Here the stigma and pollen of same flower are involved, and then second type is geitonogamy. Here the pollen grain of the one flower is falling on the stigma of the another flower by the help of the honeybee. Here pollinating agent is involved here. So then in self-pollination also, in autogamy also, there are chances of pollinating agent coming and doing the pollination there. Then third type is xenogamy, that is cross-pollination. It is flower of one plant is pollinating with that of the flower of other plant with the help of the pollinating agent. Now next is, what are the agents of the pollination? I was telling you pollinating agents. So what are these agents? So generally the agents of pollination has been divided into two parts, that is abiotic and biotic. So abiotic means non-living agents, biotic means living agents. So abiotic agents are two types. So first is anemophily and hydrophily. What is anemophily and hydrophily? Anemophily is the pollination happening by wind. Hydrophily is pollination happening by the water. So example for anemophily is palm, and for hydrophily is Vallisneria. Coming to the biotic agents, so there are generally 5 types of pollination based on the agents of the pollination. So first is entomophily, it is pollination by the insects. Then ornithophily, pollination by the birds. And third type is chiropterophily, it is pollination by bats, that is mammals. Then malacophily, it is pollination by snails and slugs. Usually you can see in the park and all, snails and slugs will be moving. This comes under the phylum Mollusca. Then myrmecophily, this is pollination by ants. So now we'll see abiotic agents first, then we'll move on to the biotic agents. Under abiotic agent, so we'll see wind pollinating flowers and water pollinating flowers separately. Now let me start with the first thing, that is pollination by wind, that is anemophily. So here wind is the most common pollinating agent, that is abiotic agent in almost all the plants. So wind pollinated flowers, they have a single ovule in each ovary. It is having some characteristic feature. Every ovary will be having a single ovule in it. I have told you in the last video, what is gynecium, what is ovary, what is locule, and what is ovule and all. So here what happens is, there is a special characteristic feature in a wind pollinating flowers. They'll be having one ovule in one ovary, and usually they'll be having an inflorescence rather than a single flower. So flowers will bunch together and form a inflorescence here. So example there, I have shown you the corn cab here. So here upper side you can see the anthers of a maize plant, that is corn, what we eat maize generally. So that is called as tassel. And here in the below diagram I have shown you the tassel as well as the female flower, that is the ear. Usually the corn what we eat is the female flower there, and the silk of that. So these both will be which wave in the wind to trap the pollen grains here. So the tassel, the stigma, and the style all will wave in a wind to trap the pollen grains, thereby the pollination will happen. So usually wind pollination is seen in the grasses, that are monocots. It is common in that. So what are the features of wind pollinating flowers? Wind pollinated flowers. So first is, enormous amount of the pollens are produced by the flowers. Why this has to be there? As it is by the wind, it is moving in the wind, there are chances of the pollen grains moving elsewhere rather than falling on a flower. So the pollen grains has to be released in enormous number in those type of flowers where it is happening by the pollination is happening by the wind. So second point is, pollen grains are light, they are not heavy, having much weight, and they are non-sticky, so that they can be transported in wind currents. Why it has to be light? For its easy transportation, and it should be non-sticky, because there should be no chances of those pollen grains going and attaching itself become sticky with the other substance and thereby no pollination. So third point is they often possesses well exposed stamens for easy dispersion of pollens into the wind currents. So stamens of those flowers will be well exposed. They are hanging outside and very exposed to all the different plants which are there. Then next point is the stigma is very large and feathery in these flowers. Why? To trap the airborne pollen grains which are present. Why the stigma has to be very large and feathery? So exposed area is very much, area is spread, so that there are chances of more pollen grains falling on it very easily, and thereby pollination can happen. In the diagram you can see the dandelion flowers, the pollens of that, how it is moving by the wind here. Coming to the second abiotic agent, that is water. Pollination by water is called as hydrophily. So it is quite rare because inside the water pollination happening is very difficult compared to the upper atmosphere by the air. It is limited to 30 genera. 30 genus of the plants. You know what a species, genus, order, family and all. So in the total 30 genus will show the pollination by water. So mostly seen in monocots. Example, Vallisneria and Hydra. These are the freshwater grasses. It is seen in this. And coming to the marine form, it is seen in Zostera, which is marine seagrass. Then the distribution of some of the bryophytes and the pteridophytes are limited because of the need of the water for the transport of the male gametes for fertilization. So here some of the bryophytes and pteridophytes are very less in distribution. They are seen usually near the water areas and water surfaces. Why? Because they usually need water medium for the transport of the male gametes, that is pollen grains, and for that fertilization. So there are less chances of availability of water every time to ensure them the proper fertilization and the pollination. So thereby their distribution goes down. So you can see the picture here. I have shown you Hydrilla plant as well as Vallisneria plant. Now how the pollination happens in Vallisneria, we'll see by taking an example of one plant here. In Vallisneria, female flowers reaches the surface of the water by a long stalk. So you can see the diagram there. First part, there is a long stalk which is holding a female flower and helping a flower to come up on a surface of a water. Then the male flowers or the pollens are released on the surface of the water, and from the another plant what happens is the male pollen grains will come on the surface. So they are carried by water current and reach the female flowers. The female flowers are already on a surface. After the release of the pollens from the male, what happens is they are carried towards the female flowers which are lying on a surface by the wind current, water current, and thereby the fertilization will happen and the pollination will happen in Vallisneria. So coming to the Zostera, that is in seagrass. So how the pollination will happen is, here the female flowers, they remain submerged in the water. They are not coming on a surface as it is seen in a Vallisneria. Rather, they'll be remaining submerged. They'll be deep inside the water. Then what about the pollen grains here? They are very large and ribbon like. So they are carried inside the water and reach the stigma. So pollen grains are very large and ribbon like. So there you saw the female flowers were attached to a ribbon like structure and were hanging on a surface. Here the pollen grains are large and ribbon like here. So they are carried inside the water and thereby reach the stigma, and pollination will happen in a Zostera. So what are the features of the water pollinated flowers? Pollen grains here, they have mucilage covering to protect from wetting, as they are living in a water medium. So they have to avoid that wetting of this thing. So thereby they'll be having a mucilage covering to avoid the wetting. So second is, in most of the aquatic plants like water hyacinth and water lily, I have shown both the diagrams here, the flowers emerge above the level of the water for entomophilia and anemophilia. As the pollination by water is very difficult, so some of the water pollinated plants are adapted such that so the plant, all the other part of a plant will be inside the water, but the flowers will come on a surface of the water. Why? Because they have to undergo a pollination by other media like anemophily and entomophily by utilization of insects and the wind. So thereby it is adapted in this way. Then wind and water pollinated flowers are not very colorful and do not produce nectar. So the wind pollinating flowers and water pollinating flowers are not much colorful to attract the pollinating agents, as they don't need a pollinating agent for their pollination and they do not produce nectar. What is nectar? It is a sweet sugary fluid produced by the nectaries. What are nectaries? These are the glands which are present in a flower. Why it has to be released? To attract the pollinating agents. So here wind is a pollinating agent and water is a pollinating agent. There is no need for that attraction of the pollinating agent, so thereby they are not colorful, as well as they won't produce the nectar. Now coming to the biotic agents. So what are biotic agents? Usually the animals are involved here for the pollination. Majority of the flowering plants use animals as pollinating agents. We'll see what are those plants, animals: butterflies, bees, flies, moths, beetles, ants, birds, bats, primates, arboreal rodents, reptiles. All these are the examples. So you know all this. Birds, there are different birds. Bats comes under mammals. Primates means different langurs, monkeys, like this. Arboreal rodents means the rodents are nothing but they belong to rat family. Arboreal means which are living on the plants, hanging on a plant. So reptiles usually some of the lizards, chameleons, they bring about the pollination. So you can see in the diagram, the bat is pollinating and some of the langur here, and bird and butterflies is pollinating. So coming to entomophily. So in biotic agents, pollination by insects is very, very important, and it is involved in almost 90% of the pollination. It is pollination by insects, particularly by bees. Among insects, particularly by the honeybees, it is happening. They are more common. Often flowers of animal pollinated plants are specifically adapted for a particular species of animal. So here what happens is, the flowers which are involved, which are dependent on some of the animal for its pollination, they usually depend on a specific species. So they are species specific for their pollination. So what are the features of insect pollinated flowers? So they are very large, colorful, fragrant and rich in nectar. Why? Because it has to attract the insects there. Then nectar and pollen grains are the floral rewards for the pollination. So whatever the bees are coming, they'll feed on the nectar and the pollens. It is a reward for them, and thereby whatever the thing is attached to their legs, the pollens, they'll go and sit in another flower, and the pollen which has stick on the legs of that insect, that will fall on a stigma of that flower, and thereby pollination will happen. When flowers are very small, so if the flowers are big, so it is easy for a bee to come and sit on it and to do the pollination process. If it is small, then what happens is all the small flowers will bunch together to form an inflorescence, thereby it is easily visible for the bees to come and sit on. Then flowers pollinated by flies and beetles, they secrete foul odor to attract these animals. So some of the flowers whereby the beetles and flies are the pollinating agents, they secrete some odor which attract only those species of the beetles and the flies there. Then next is pollen grains are generally sticky. Here, why it has to be sticky? It has to attach itself on the legs or the bristles present on the legs of the insects. So thereby it has to be sticky. So some plants provide safe places as floral reward to lay eggs. So some of the insects will get the safe place to lay their eggs. Example, Amorphophallus is a flower. It is a plant which will be having a tallest flower of 6 feet. So under its surface, some of the insects will come and lay the eggs. So here both are getting benefited. The flower of the Amorphophallus is getting pollinated, and the insect which is doing the pollinating, that is a pollinating agent, will get the space to lay their eggs and a very safety place for their eggs to be secured here. So second example is a moth species and yucca plant. You can see the diagram here. A yucca plant, they cannot complete their life cycle without each other. So what happens is yucca plant need a moth species, a particular moth species to complete its life cycle. We'll see how here. Moth lays its egg in the locule of the ovary. So moth lays the egg in the locule of the ovary of the yucca plant. So what happens is the larvae come out of the eggs as seeds start developing. The flowers get pollinated by them. As it is laying the egg coming inside the ovary, directly the pollen grains are falling on an ovary and thereby pollination is happening. It is benefiting the yucca plant by pollinating it, and the bees are getting benefited here. I mean, this moth is getting benefited by laying its egg inside the ovary, which is also a safe place for its larvae to hatch out. Then many insects, the larvae come out of the eggs as seeds start developing. So as the seeds start developing after the pollination, the larvae will come out of the eggs which are being hatched there. Then many insects consume pollen or nectar without bringing about the pollination. They are called as pollen or nectar robbers. Some of the insects, what does is, they won't help the plants for the pollination. Instead, they'll feed on the nectar and the pollen grains of that flowers and they'll come back. But they're not actually pollinating the flowers there. So they are generally called as robbers. As they are robbing the nectar and the pollen grains, they are called as pollen or nectar robbers. So at this I'll stop today's class. We have let me tell you what and all we have studied today. I have told you what is pollination, what are the different types of the pollination. In that we have studied 3 types: autogamy and geitonogamy. These 2 comes under self-pollination. Then third is xenogamy. Then what are the agents of pollination? Under that we have studied biotic and abiotic agents. Under biotic agent we have studied 2 agents in detail. So that is pollination by wind and pollination by water. By giving an example of each plant we have studied. Then coming to the biotic agent, we have studied one, that is entomophily, that is pollination by the insects. And I have given you some of the example to show the specific relationship among the plant and a species and their how they are related to a particular species, their species specificness I have told you. So I'll stop at this point. So let us meet in a next class.